What happens when the voice of civil rights meets the prophet of the absurd, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., preaching hope, justice, and nonviolence, versus Albert Camus, the philosopher who declared life meaningless, yet demanded rebellion? Stay until the end, because this clash may change the way you see hope, despair, and freedom forever.
I have walked through the streets of a broken Europe, where cities were reduced to ashes, where men killed each other in the name of truth, in the name of God, in the name of history. And what I saw, again and again, was not divine justice, nor universal progress, but absurdity. The absurd is not an idea. It is the air we breathe. It is the silence of the world when we cry for answers. It is the fate of every man who demands meaning and receives only indifference. I did not invent the absurd. I simply refused to look away from it. You, Dr. King, speak of dreams, of a promised land, of justice rolling down like waters. I understand why you do, but I must warn you, the universe does not bend to justice. It bends to nothing. There is no guarantee that your dream will ever be realized, because there is no hand guiding history, no providence shaping human destiny. To believe otherwise is to risk delusion. Yet, here lies the paradox that makes me neither a cynic nor a nihilist. To accept the absurd is not to surrender to despair. Quite the opposite. It is to live without appeal, to find dignity not in divine promises but in human rebellion. A rebellion not of bombs or hatred, but of clarity and refusal. When a man accepts that life has no ultimate meaning, he is free. Free to act without waiting for eternity. Free to create justice here, in the brief light of our fragile existence. Freedom comes not from God or fate, but from the courage to look at the void and still declare, I will not bow. I fear that your vision, noble as it is, risks chaining men once again to an illusion. That justice is guaranteed, that history has a moral arc. No, my friend, history has no arc. It is written in blood, in dust, in silence. If we wish for justice, it must come only from us, from our hands, from our revolt against cruelty. So, I ask, is it better to comfort the oppressed with dreams of a promised land, or to awaken them to the absurd truth that nothing is promised, and yet, in spite of that, we must fight, we must create, we must rebel? I stand not for despair, but for rebellion without hope of eternity. That is the only honest dignity I know. Asterisk.
Brother Camus, I have heard the music of your words, heavy with the silence of a godless universe. I respect your courage to face despair without flinching. But I must tell you, I cannot and will not give my people silence where they hunger for song. When I stood in the streets of Montgomery, when I saw men and women beaten for daring to sit at a counter, when I buried children murdered for walking into a church, I could not look at them and say, life is absurd. Expect nothing. Rebel in the void. Oh, my friend, I had to tell them, justice is real, and though it is delayed, it shall roll down like waters. You say the arc of history bends to nothing. I say it bends toward justice. And I do not mean by magic, nor by the hand of providence alone. I mean that the conscience of man cannot forever tolerate oppression. Pharaoh cannot reign forever, Caesar cannot crush forever, Jim Crow cannot stand forever. Tyranny may endure for a night, but morning comes. Always, morning comes. I know the universe can be cold. I have felt that cold wind when jail bars closed upon me, when death threats filled my home, when the grave claimed my brothers and sisters too soon. But in that cold, I have also felt a fire, not the fire of hatred, but the fire of love. For love, even when the world mocks it, is the one force that transforms enemies into brothers. Camus, you speak of rebellion. I too speak of rebellion, but not rebellion without hope. I speak of a rebellion rooted in the belief that every man, every woman, carries the image of God, whether the world acknowledges it or not. That belief does not chain us, it liberates us. It tells us we are more than dust. It tells the oppressed they are more than the absurdity of their suffering. Yes, history is written in blood, but it is also written in song. The spiritual sung in chains, the hymns sung in marches, the dreams spoken before the Lincoln Memorial, these are not illusions. They are declarations. They are the hammer that shapes history. If I tell a child in Birmingham that justice will never come, only absurdity, what will that child live for? But if I tell her that her life matters, that her suffering is not in vain, that one day freedom will rise, then she can march, then she can endure, then she can hope. You say nothing is promised. I say love promises everything. You say life has no meaning. I say man gives it meaning by choosing justice over hatred, by choosing brotherhood over absurdity. And so I ask you, Camus, which builds a world worth living in, your rebellion in the void, or my dream that refuses to die?
Dr. King, I cannot help but admire the fire in your voice, the certainty with which you proclaim that love redeems, that justice bends the arc of history. I envy it, but envy is not the same as belief. You speak of pharaohs, Caesars, tyrants who fall. Yet you know, as I do, that for each pharaoh cast down, another rises. For each chain broken, another is forged. You speak of the children buried in your land. I have walked among children buried in mine, in Algiers, in Paris, in the ruins of Europe after the war. Their eyes will never open again, and no river of justice will wash them clean. I do not say this to dismiss your faith, but to remind you, the world is not as merciful as your dream. To believe that history bends toward justice is to risk blindness to the countless moments it does not. The plague does not spare the righteous. The bullet does not pause before a child. Absurdity is not an enemy that can be defeated. It is the condition of our existence. And yet, I do not surrender to despair. You mistake me if you think I preach resignation. No, rebellion is my answer. If the universe is indifferent, then man must create his own warmth. If justice is not guaranteed, then it must be demanded, not as the fulfillment of some divine promise, but as the stubborn cry of the human soul. You say rebellion needs hope. I say rebellion is hope, the kind that does not deceive. When I write, when I act, when I refuse to bow to tyranny, I do not need the universe to reward me. It is enough to live fully, to refuse lies, to love without reason, to fight knowing I will lose. There is dignity in that. Dr. King, your dream is noble, but what happens when it is betrayed? When love does not conquer hate? When a morning you promised does not come? I fear your people may awaken one day to find that the arc of history bends not toward justice, but toward silence. And yet perhaps your dream is necessary, just as my defiance is necessary. Perhaps man needs both, the fire of belief and the cold of lucidity. But I cannot follow you into faith. I remain in the absurd, and I say, let us love, let us fight, not because the world redeems it, but because we choose it freely against the void.
Brother Camus, your words are heavy with truth, but they carry only half the weight. You are right. Tyrants rise again, injustice repeats, the plague strikes both the innocent and the guilty. But hear me well. If man creates meaning only against the void, then the oppressed will never rise. They need more than rebellion. They need a vision. When you tell a man his suffering is absurd, you leave him in the pit. But when I tell him his suffering can be redeemed, that it has a place in a story larger than his pain, then he can climb out. That is why faith matters. Not faith in illusions, but in the power of justice born of love. You say rebellion is enough. But rebellion without love becomes bitterness, violence for its own sake. I have seen it. I have walked among those who denied hope, turned to hate, and their chains only grew heavier. Love is not naive. It is the most powerful rebellion of all. You ask what happens if the morning does not come. I ask, what happens if men stop believing it can? If slaves in Egypt had believed Pharaoh eternal, they would have remained in chains. If my people had believed Jim Crow eternal, they would have remained in silence. Hope, my brother, is not a deception, it is a weapon. And I do not stand alone in this belief. I stand with Moses who saw the Red Sea parted, with prophets who cried against kings, with Christ who carried the cross and declared that love conquers even death. You may not believe in the resurrection, but I have seen it. In lives restored, in enemies reconciled, in a nation slowly, painfully learning to walk toward justice. You say you cannot follow me into faith. I do not ask you to. I only ask you to see that without faith, whether in God, in love, or in the dignity of man, rebellion collapses into nihilism. For a fire that has no fuel burns out. My dream is the fuel. It does not erase the absurd, but it answers it with purpose. So, Albert Camus, I say again, your rebellion is noble, but it is incomplete. Man must not only defy the void, he must transform it. And he cannot do so alone. He needs love, he needs hope, he needs faith. Without these, there is only endless night. But with them, yes, even in the face of death, morning will always come.
Dr. King, I hear the thunder in your voice, and I will not deny it moves me. You are right. Man needs more than rebellion. But I cannot surrender to the illusions that comfort while the absurd still reigns. You believe hope is a weapon. I believe clarity is. I cannot promise the dawn, only the night in which we must light our own torches. Yet perhaps it is enough to see the darkness as it is and still refuse it, to act without certainty, to love without reward, to fight knowing the victory will never be final. That, to me, is the deepest form of courage. If your faith sustains you, then let it burn. But for me, rebellion without illusion is the only honest path. And honesty, in a world of lies, is itself a kind of justice. Asterisk.
Brother Camus, I will leave you with this. Clarity without hope is a lantern that flickers out. A man may endure for a time by defying the void, but a people cannot march without a song, without a vision that tomorrow may be brighter than today. You say the dawn cannot be promised. I say it must be proclaimed, for only then do men rise to meet it. Love is not an illusion. It is the very act of rebellion that transforms history. The world may not reward it, but it bends because of it. So let us walk, you with your torch, I with my dream. Perhaps they are not so different, for in the end, both resist despair. And resistance, my friend, is the beginning of freedom.
Tonight, we witness a clash of worlds. The relentless clarity of Albert Camus, facing the absurd without illusions, and the undying hope of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who preaches justice, love, and the power of dreams. Camus reminded us that life offers no guarantees, that the void is always present, and that courage can exist even without promises. King showed us that hope, love, and faith can shape reality, ignite movements, and lift entire communities. Life calls for both, to act in defiance of despair and to dream in pursuit of justice, to see the world as it is, and still choose to build a better one, to embrace rebellion, yet never abandon hope. If this debate moved you, inspired you, or challenged the way you think, subscribe now and follow our channel. More encounters like this are coming, where philosophy and action, thought and vision, collide to illuminate the human journey. Remember, the void is real, but so is your power to act. The dawn may not be promised, but the courage to light it belongs to you. Watch, reflect, and let your own rebellion and hope shape the world.